Hey there, welcome back to Fertility Cafe. I'm your host, Eloise Drain. Welcome to episode 71 of Fertility Cafe. For some, surrogacy in the U.S. is unobtainable due to cost. So another option to consider on your path to parenthood is international surrogacy. Now, despite a lack of federal regulation, the United States has by far the most robust and safe surrogacy system in the world. Unfortunately, it is also extraordinarily expensive. International surrogacy may be an option for intended parents. However, there are important factors to consider when working with a gestational surrogate who lives in another country. Just as surrogacy laws in the U.S. vary from state to state, laws on surrogacy overseas vary from country to country, and surrogacy is even illegal in some nations. Even though the actual process of surrogacy is the same for every country, there are still important things to know about how your surrogacy journey may vary. Every country with legal surrogacy has several local agencies that can help you with the surrogate process. But if you would like to explore the option of international surrogacy, it is highly recommended that you first speak with an international surrogacy attorney that is well versed in the country you are considering on the process and legalities involved where international surrogacy is allowed. In this episode, we'll talk about all the countries that allow international surrogacy and the highlights of each. We'll also go into detail about the specifics you need to contemplate when considering international surrogacy. Let's get started. First of all, what is international surrogacy? International surrogacy is the process of having a child with the help of a gestational surrogate who lives in another country. Medically speaking, the process is the same as the domestic surrogacy, but there are many logistical differences that make the process far more difficult for intended parents to control or even oversee. When intended parents consider surrogacy, many automatically assume that international surrogacy programs may offer a more affordable way of adding a child to their family. Surrogacy across the world was unregulated for many years. Often, intended parents from one country would travel to another, less expensive country to have a child. For years, India was a very popular location for intended parents to have a child. After their baby was born, intended parents would bring their child home to their country. But as more cases of mishandled and exploited surrogates began to make the news, many international surrogacy laws began to change. Countries began to shut down their borders for international intended parents, allowing only surrogacy with domestic intended parents who met certain qualifications. In some instances, after the closures occurred, some intended parents were stuck in the crossfire and were left trying to figure out how to get their child home. So why would someone even consider international surrogacy? It's no secret that any assisted reproduction process is costly. There are medical professionals, legal professionals, support professionals, medications, and of course, your surrogate to pay for. All of this adds up to quite a costly process. So naturally, many intended parents look for ways to save money. Because of exchange rates and living conditions in other countries, sometimes working with a surrogate in another country is less expensive than compensating a surrogate in the United States. And really, that's it. That's the only real benefit of going the international route. But is it worth it? The short answer is, it depends. No one can decide what's right for you other than you. The main pro is the lower cost, but the lower cost is usually a reflection of the decrease in support you will get along the way. Additionally, the savings on compensating your surrogate is often nullified by the additional travel costs, legal steps, and time that goes into ensuring your parental rights are in place across the international borders. Let's talk about some of the issues that you can run into on an international surrogacy journey. First, let's discuss the legal issues. Laws vary from country to country, and some countries have laws that give considerable power and control to the surrogate that can put a legal adoption or even a successful birth in jeopardy. For example, Russia has legal restrictions in place that only allow surrogacy for straight couples and single females. Some countries like Greece and Georgia only allow surrogacy for married heterosexual couples. Additionally, some countries, such as Canada, only permit an altruistic surrogacy, which means the surrogate cannot be compensated for her services, only reimbursed for medical expenses and other pregnancy related costs. This can bring about ethical complexities or can be perceived as the intended parents taking advantage of a surrogate who is not being paid appropriately as she deserves. With an international surrogacy process, you, as the intended parents, will need to travel to the country where your surrogate is at various stages of the process. Since the COVID pandemic, we've seen how suddenly and unexpectedly travel can be halted, limited, or otherwise out of your control, which is not what you want when dealing with a surrogacy journey. Similar to the issue of physical distance between you and your surrogate, you'll also need to deal with cultural and linguistic barriers. Many intended parents find it difficult and uncomfortable to be unable to communicate with their surrogates in the way that they will like because of language differences. Another issue to consider is the quality of medical care your surrogate and developing child will receive during pregnancy. Medical standards abroad are not regulated in the same way as they are in the U.S. As a result, the success rates of embryo transfers for an international surrogate can be much lower. Therefore, intended parents may have to pay for multiple embryo transfer attempts, which can dramatically increase costs, time, and stress. Additionally, if your surrogate is living in a country with poor or limited access to quality food and drinking water, or if she's living in a stressful environment, this could affect your child's development. Citizenship is another must for consideration. Each country that allows surrogacy may have different rules or laws regarding your child's citizenship. Unfortunately, in some countries, it is still very much an added obstacle. You need to wait weeks before your child can get the proper documentation to return to the States. The U.S. Department of State determines whether a child born abroad to a U.S. citizen parent can acquire U.S. citizenship at birth. A child born abroad acquires U.S. citizenship at birth if the parent or parents of the child meet the conditions prescribed in the Immigration and Nationality Act, INA. It interprets the INA to mean that a child born abroad must be genetically or gestationally related to a U.S. citizen parent or to a non-U.S. citizen parent who is married to a U.S. citizen parent at the time of the child's birth. It requires DNA testing to ensure that you are the biological parent of the child. Now, let's talk specifically about a few countries that are popular for international surrogacy and some of the issues you need to be aware of. First one is Mexico. In 2016, Mexican surrogacy came to a halt for foreigners. Surrogacy was banned in the state of Tabasco and any other states that were no surrogacy laws. It made surrogacy seekers uncertain as a few fertility clinics and surrogacy agencies in Mexico continued offering surrogacy services despite negative law development. In 2021, Mexico joined the short list of countries with a legal framework supporting compensated surrogacy for married, single, gay, straight, and foreign intended parents. The Supreme Court overrode the prohibition against surrogacy by the state of Tabasco. It reversed the ban and returned the regulations to the way they were before the ban was enacted. As a result of the court's decision, no Mexican state can prohibit surrogacy. Ukraine. Ukraine permits compensated surrogacy for heterosexual couples, and these intended parents are automatically named the child's parents after delivery. It is only available to heterosexual married couples. Intended parents receive full custody at the time of conception and are listed as the parents on the baby's birth certificate. Ukraine's surrogacy law does not require a court-ordered adoption process. As of this recording, Ukraine is in the middle of a war with Russia. Considerations must be taken to determine how will the surrogate and your child be safe, and how would you be able to get in and out of the country to get your child. Russia. In Russia, international surrogacy is allowed for heterosexual married couples and single females, and intended parents need to provide a medical certificate proving their inability to carry a pregnancy to term. To be a surrogate, a Russian citizen must have at least one biological child of her own, and if married, needs written consent to serve as a surrogate from her spouse. While surrogacy in Russia is currently legal, there has been a recent push to ban it in this country. In addition, Russian legislation stipulates a surrogate can keep the baby she delivers. Surrogates are allowed to change their mind and register as the legal parents after the birth, which would trump any contract signed with intended parents. The contract signed between the surrogate and the parents state the intended parents are contributing to create a favorable condition for the period of pregnancy and after it by paying the surrogate a reimbursement. It will not say that the surrogate must give you the baby upon delivery. Colombia. Colombia allows altruistic international surrogacy for anyone who has a physiological inability to conceive. Same-sex couples can work with surrogates as long as one person is biologically related. Outside of the U.S., Colombia is the only country where foreign same-sex couples can find a surrogate. They have very liberal laws that do not discriminate on the basis of gender or sexuality. There is no explicit legislation supporting surrogacy in Colombia. Instead, the legal framework is established by a 2009 ruling by the Constitutional Court. That ruling extended the constitutional protection for all families conceived through scientific methods to gestational surrogacy. Protected surrogacy agreements must be altruistic and follow international best practices. There are several other countries that do allow for surrogacy: Canada, Greece, and the country of Georgia, just to name a few more. Finally, I have to caution you against horror stories that have occurred in cases of international surrogacy. For example, there have been cases where foreign fertility clinics substituted alternate donor sperm and eggs for the U.S. parent's genetic material, either intentionally, when the parent's genetic material ended up not being viable, or through inadvertent lab errors. The intended parents only learned of these undisclosed switches or errors when they obtained the DNA test results after the child's birth during the citizenship process. Sometimes, as a result of these errors, the child born was unable to obtain U.S. citizenship or a U.S. passport and was unable to leave the country they were born in. Becoming a parent is a beautiful thing, and I believe it should be a wonderful process and experience for you too. Unfortunately, international surrogacy can pose many threats to you having that positive, problem-free journey to parenthood. There are benefits, of course, and they're purely financial. So before you make a decision on whether international surrogacy is right for you, weigh all of the issues and be thoughtful about what's truly important to you. Don't let your desperation or eagerness to have a child or any financial limitations you're running into override your gut instinct. My job is to make sure you know as much as possible, and oftentimes the logistical challenges of international surrogacy aren't talked about. So now that you know, do your research so you're well informed. Trust yourself, trust your intuition, and make the decision that you feel is best for you. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this episode helpful, please rate Fertility Cafe on your favorite listening platform and share this episode with anyone you think could benefit from hearing it. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, remember, love has no limits. Neither should parenthood.